The church hall was quiet except for the soft hum of a ceiling fan. Kids sat in a circle, crayons and paper scattered everywhere. I had volunteered for the day, helping run a small weekend art session at a shelter that supported children who had lost their parents. That's when I saw him, Keanu Reeves, quietly stepping into the room without making a scene. Most of the children didn't recognize him at first, but I did. I walked over and introduced myself, surprised he had come without any cameras or bodyguards. "I'm just here to listen," he said gently. He sat on the floor with the children, smiling, coloring with them, asking them about their drawings. That's when one little boy, about 7, with wide brown eyes and a shy voice, suddenly asked, "What does God mean to you, mister?" The room went silent. Even the crayons stopped moving. Keanu looked up slowly, eyes locking with the boys. No one laughed, no one interrupted. Something about the way the boy asked it made everything still. Keanu blinked, then said, "That's a big question," his voice soft. But behind his calm, I noticed something else. His hands had started, shaking just slightly, and his eyes were filling up with something deeper than anyone expected. What memory had that question stirred? Keanu sat quietly for a few seconds, his eyes still locked on the boy. "What does God mean to me?" he repeated, almost to himself. He looked down, rubbed his hands together like he was warming up to speak, and then looked back at the boy. "When I was your age," he began slowly, "I asked that same question, but I didn't get an answer for a long time." His voice had dropped slightly, not for drama, but like he was fighting through something heavy. The kids leaned in. So did I. "I lost someone very close to me when I was a little older than you," Keanu continued. "She used to tell me that God doesn't live in the sky or in a church, but in the quiet moments, in the people who stay, when everything falls apart." I didn't understand her then, not until I was alone. His hands were clasped together now, and I could tell this wasn't something he rehearsed. "For a long time, I didn't believe in anything," he admitted, "because the pain was too much. I used to sit in silence and wonder if God had left me behind." The kids didn't move, and I felt my own throat tighten. But one day I saw a man in an alley feeding stray dogs. He had nothing, not even shoes, but he gave anyway. And that moment made me ask myself, what if God shows up in people like that? He turned back to the little boy and smiled gently. "So now, when I think about God, I don't think of a throne in the sky. I think of a child who still dares to ask deep questions, like you just did." The room stayed silent, but something had shifted. The boy blinked slowly and whispered, "So God is kindness?" Keanu nodded, eyes a little red. "Yeah, and courage, and showing up even when it's hard." I stared at him, stunned, not because he gave the perfect answer, but because it was real. But right when we thought it was over, the boy suddenly stood up and reached into his pocket. "Then I want to show you something," he said. What was this child about to reveal? The little boy slowly pulled out a small, folded photograph from his pocket. It was old and worn, the edges curled like it had been held many times before. He walked over to Keanu and handed it to him with both hands, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is my dad. He used to say the same thing, that God is in the people who stay." Keanu took the photo carefully, his fingers trembling just slightly as he studied the faded image of a smiling man in a military uniform holding the same boy in his arms. "He died last year," the boy said softly. "But he told me before he went, if you're ever really lost, ask someone what God means to them. The answer will help you find your way." The room fell even more silent, if that was possible. I looked around and saw that a few of the kids were now wiping their eyes, and even I couldn't stop my heart from aching. Keanu looked up at me, and then back at the boy, and I could tell something had hit him deeper than even he expected. He reached into his jacket pocket and slowly pulled out a chain, simple, silver, with a tiny carved charm at the end. "My sister gave this to me," he said, placing it gently into the boy's hand. "When she was sick, she said the same thing, that love doesn't end just because someone's gone." The boy looked down at the chain like it was a treasure. Then Keanu added, "You didn't just ask me a question today. You reminded me of something I forgot." I leaned forward and asked the boy, "Why did you pick today to ask that question?" And without blinking, the boy looked at both of us and said, "Because last night I saw him in my dream. He told me to come here." A chill ran through me. Keanu leaned in, eyes wide. "What do you mean, saw who?" The boy pointed to the photo still in Keanu's hand. "My dad. He told me someone would be here today. Someone who needed to remember who they are." I stared at the boy, unsure if this was just imagination or something bigger. How could he have known Keanu would be here? Keanu stared at the boy, visibly shaken, gripping the photo in one hand and the edge of the table with the other. "Your dad told you to come here today?" he asked, his voice a little rough now. The boy nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. "He said the man in black would be here, and that I had to remind him who he really is." The room had fallen into a strange stillness, almost like time had paused. I glanced at Keanu. He was wearing a black jacket. "What did he say I needed to remember?" Keanu asked quietly. The boy looked at him, almost sad. "That you weren't born to carry sadness. You were born to carry light. But you forgot." Keanu's lips parted, but he didn't say anything. I stepped closer to him and noticed his eyes were watering like something had cracked open inside. Then the boy turned to me. "And you," he said, "you were supposed to bring him here." I froze. "Me? But I don't even know your dad." The boy shrugged like it didn't matter. "But you were kind when it counted, that's what makes you part of it." Keanu stood up slowly, took a breath like he was trying to come back to earth, and asked the boy, "What was your dad's name?" The boy smiled for the first time. "Jonathan Reeves." Keanu's knees buckled slightly, and he sat back down, hard. That was my father's name," he said, stunned. "But he died when I was 3. I felt a cold wave wash over me. "Wait, what are you saying?" I whispered. Keanu looked at the photo again, then back at the boy, and his voice cracked as he said, "This is a photo of my dad. This isn't possible." The boy simply said, "It is. When it matters most." The room suddenly felt charged, like something invisible had passed through. And then, just as calmly as before, the boy asked, "Can I go outside for a moment? I want to sit in the sun." I opened the door for him, still trying to make sense of what just happened. As he stepped out, Keanu turned to me and whispered, "Who is he and how did he get that photo?" But I didn't have an answer, only more questions. I followed the boy outside, where he sat quietly on a bench facing the sun, eyes closed, as if he could hear something we couldn't. Keanu walked slowly behind me, still gripping the old photo, his expression unreadable. "This doesn't make sense," I said under my breath. "It's like he knows things he couldn't possibly know." Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he sat beside the boy and asked gently, "Why did you say that? Man in the picture is your dad?" The boy opened his eyes slowly and looked at Keanu, calm and certain, "Because I remember him singing to me when I was little. But then one day he disappeared. Mommy told me he went to heaven, but I kept dreaming of him. And in my last dream, he said, 'Find the one whose sadness looks like mine.'" Keanu went pale. He took out his wallet and pulled a small photo from it, one I hadn't seen before. It was the same man. "I've never shown this to anyone," Keanu said, voice trembling. "How do you know this is your dad?" The boy smiled. "Because he called me by a name no one else does. Little J. That's what he used to whisper when I couldn't sleep." Keanu looked like the air had been knocked out of him. "That's what he called me too, when I was a baby," he whispered. "Little J." My heart was racing. "Keanu, is it possible? Could he have had another family?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "He left when I was 3. I never saw him again. I thought he died. But maybe he didn't. The boy reached into his pocket again and handed Keanu a crumpled paper. On it was a hand-drawn picture of two boys holding hands, under a big sun. Above it, in a child's handwriting, it said, "Me and my brother. One day we'll meet." Keanu stared at the paper like it had cracked something open in his chest. "Why did you draw this?" he asked. The boy looked at him with pure honesty. "Because I felt you, even before I saw you." I stepped back, overwhelmed. Were they brothers? Half-brothers somehow? How was this even possible? But before we could speak again, a black car slowly pulled up to the curb, and inside it sat a woman staring directly at the boy. "That's my mom," he said quietly. "But she doesn't know who you are yet." Keanu turned to me, panic in his eyes. What am I supposed to say to her? The car door opened, and a woman in her early 40s stepped out, her eyes scanning the scene until they landed on Keanu. She froze, her hand tightening around her purse strap, then slowly walked toward us. The boy stood up and waved cheerfully. "Hi, Mommy, this is the man I told you about." Keanu stood too, trying to compose himself, but I could see his hands trembling. The woman's expression shifted from confusion to recognition and then disbelief. "Keanu?" she said, almost like she couldn't trust her own voice. He nodded. "Do I know you?" She stared at him, her mouth slightly open. You probably don't remember me. My name is Clara. I met your father almost 30 years ago after he left your family." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. "My father didn't die when I was 3? Clara shook her head. "No, he didn't. He just left. He came to our town, started over. He never talked much about his past. He was kind but broken. I didn't know he had another son until a week before he died. He wrote it in a letter." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old folded envelope. "I brought it in case I ever met you." Keanu took it with shaking hands, and as he opened it, I could see his eyes darting across the handwritten lines. Suddenly, his face collapsed into grief, silent, heavy grief. He turned the letter so I could see. It read, "To my sons, Keanu and Jason. I failed you both in different ways, but I pray that someday you'll find each other. I loved you both more than I ever knew how to say." Keanu looked up at Clara. "Jason, that's his name?" She nodded. "Jason Reeves, but he always asked why he didn't have your last name." Keanu crouched and hugged the boy tightly, like something had finally clicked into place. "You're my brother," he whispered. Jason smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. I knew it. I just knew. The street around us felt oddly quiet, like even the city had paused for this moment. I was standing there, trying to process what I'd just witnessed when Clara turned to me and asked softly, "Were you the one who helped him today?" I nodded. She smiled gratefully. "Then you were meant to be here too." Suddenly, Clara's phone buzzed, and her face went pale as she read the screen. "Oh no, I forgot. Jason's doctor appointment is in 20 minutes. I looked at her, confused. "Doctor?" She hesitated. "Jason's been sick. That's why he was out here selling lemonade last month. He has a heart condition, a rare one." Keanu immediately asked, "Can I come with you?" Clara looked at him, then at Jason, and slowly nodded. "Of course." But as we turned toward the car, none of us noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Its window slightly rolled down, a camera lens aimed right at us. As we drove to the hospital, the mood in the car was heavy but strangely calm, like everyone was trying to hold back questions that were too big for the moment. Jason sat between Keanu and Clara, quietly humming a tune under his breath. I noticed Keanu watching him the entire time, his eyes filled with something between fear and love. "What's the diagnosis?" Keanu finally asked. Clara sighed. "It's called restrictive cardiomyopathy. His heart muscles are stiff. He tires easily and gets dizzy, but he doesn't show it much. He's stronger than all of us." Keanu nodded, jaw clenched as if trying to stop a wave of emotion from breaking. At the hospital, a nurse greeted us and led us to a pediatric cardiology wing. Jason seemed completely unfazed, like this was just a normal routine for him. But then came the twist none of us saw coming. As Jason's vitals were being checked, a different doctor entered the room, someone not familiar to Clara. "I'm Dr. Harris," he said. "There's been a change in Jason's chart. We need to talk." Clara frowned. "A change? What do you mean?" The doctor glanced at Jason, then motioned for the rest of us to step outside. In the hallway, he pulled out a file and lowered his voice. "2 days ago, someone sent in a DNA report connected to Jason's medical file. It turns out Jason has a sibling who is a full genetic match, same father and mother." Keanu blinked. "Wait, full sibling? That's not possible." Clara looked like she'd seen a ghost. "There must be a mistake. Jason's father died years ago, and I've never had another child." Dr. Harris shrugged. "I'm just telling you what the lab showed. There's someone else with identical parental DNA, and here's the part that matters. This sibling recently registered as an organ donor. That's why the system flagged a perfect heart match." Keanu stepped back stunned. "Are you saying Jason might have a heart donor match? Now?" The doctor nodded. "Yes, if confirmed, this could save Jason's life." The room spun. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Clara was speechless. "But who is the match?" Dr. Harris flipped through a page and looked up. "The name on the file is Keanu Reeves." Time stopped. Keanu stared at the doctor, disbelief flooding his face. "Me? But I never registered anything." The doctor looked puzzled. "Someone used your ID. It came through just 2 days ago." That's when Keanu turned toward me, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Someone's watching us. Someone knew we'd meet." Then it hit me. We never saw who was inside that black SUV earlier. Someone was following this from the start. As Keanu stood frozen, trying to make sense of how his name ended up in Jason's donor file, I felt a sudden chill down my spine. The doctor, unaware of the storm brewing between us, continued. "We've double-checked everything. It's a flawless match. Whoever submitted the form had full access to your identity documents, medical history, even your genetic data." Keanu's face darkened. "That means this wasn't an accident. Someone did this intentionally." Clara sat down, visibly shaking. "But why? Why would someone do this? And what does it mean for Jason?" Keanu leaned forward. "It means someone wants me here, with him, now. And they're not just watching, they're pulling the strings." Suddenly, Jason appeared at the door, holding a juice box, unaware of the storm behind that hallway. "Are we going home soon?" he asked, with a tired smile. Keanu walked over, knelt down, and hugged him tightly. "Not yet, buddy. But I promise we'll fix everything." As he stood, I noticed something sticking out of Keanu's jacket pocket, a folded note. He pulled it out slowly, his hand trembling, and opened it. The handwriting was strange, clean, but unfamiliar. "You have 48 hours to choose. Give him your heart, or walk away forever. No police, no press, no time." We all stared at each other in horror. Someone knew Jason's condition. Someone had faked Keanu's donor registration. Someone had timed it all perfectly, and now they were demanding the unthinkable. Keanu crumpled the paper in, his fist. "They want me to give up my life, literally." Clara gasped. "But who would do this? And why target Jason?" That's when I remembered something. An old article from years ago. Keanu had quietly funded a medical trial for experimental heart treatments. The project was shut down mysteriously after one of the lead scientists vanished. And now, out of nowhere, Jason's file showed an anonymous donor with access to classified genetic tech. Keanu looked at me. "You think this is connected?" I nodded. "And whoever's behind it, they don't want money. They want you to suffer or disappear." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't from shock, it was fear. Fear that the next 48 hours might be our last together, unless we uncovered the truth. We rushed back to the apartment, locking every door, closing the curtains, and turning off our phones. Keanu paced the room like a man running out of air, the crumpled note still in his hand. "Someone out there wants me dead and they're using a child to force it," he muttered. Clara was on the couch holding Jason close, whispering to him that everything would be okay, even though none of us believed it. I started digging through online records, medical files, and anything I could find on that abandoned heart project Keanu once funded. Then finally a name appeared: Dr. Elias Rowan, a brilliant scientist in regenerative medicine. He vanished 5 years ago. No one ever found him. I clicked through a few more files, and my heart froze. In one photo, behind a lab window, stood a child who looked exactly like Jason. "Keanu," I called out. "You need to see this." He leaned over my shoulder, and when he saw the image, he went pale. "That's him. That's Jason." Clara rushed over. "What are you saying?" I clicked to the next page. Subject 11. Genetically modified embryo. Trial suspended due to ethical violations. Lead donor DNA, Kr. Keanu's knees nearly buckled. "They use my DNA without permission?" Clara's voice cracked. "That means Jason isn't just a child with heart disease. He's part of that. Real. He was created in that lab." My voice was barely a whisper. "Jason might not be sick naturally. He might have been made sick to lure you back in." Suddenly, we heard something outside. A black SUV pulled up again, headlights off. Keanu backed away from the window. "It's them." A knock came at the door. 3 short taps, then silence. Clara held Jason tighter. I grabbed a kitchen knife. Keanu slowly approached the door, peered through the peephole, and froze. "No way," he whispered. "It's Elias. He's alive." Before we could react, Keanu unlocked the door and opened it slightly. A man stepped in, older now, bearded, eyes sunken, but unmistakably him. "Keanu," Elias said quietly. "We need to talk. You were never supposed to know, but if we don't act now, Jason dies, and so do you." The room spun with confusion, betrayal, and terror. Keanu's hands curled into fists. "Why him? Why me?" Elias looked down. "Because he's not just your clone. He's your second chance. And someone wants that chance destroyed." Time was running out, and the final answer was coming, straight for us. Keanu stared at Elias, fists clenched, his voice shaking. "You stole my DNA, you created a child. You built a life from my blood, and now you say he's dying?" Elias nodded slowly. "I didn't plan it this way. The experiment was shut down when people found out we were using celebrity DNA for enhanced traits. But Jason, he was already alive by then. He was the only one who survived." Clara gasped, holding Jason close. "You mean there were others?" Elias lowered his eyes. 10 embryos. 9 failed. Jason was the last. But he was never supposed to live outside the lab. His body wasn't ready. That's why his heart is failing." Keanu stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "And you didn't think to tell me? To warn me?" Elias looked at him, his own eyes glassy. "I wanted to, but I was being watched. The moment I stepped out, they would have killed him. So I waited for the perfect time. And now, there's only one thing left." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small vial. "This is the serum we created to stabilize his condition, but it only works with a live DNA bond. That's why your heart was targeted. They needed your genes to activate it fully." Keanu took the vial and looked at Jason, who was playing quietly with his toy car, unaware of the world trying to tear him apart. "If I give this, will he live?" Elias nodded. "If you choose to become his legal guardian and give consent for the treatment, he has a chance. But once you inject, you'll be marked. The people funding this experiment, they'll come for both of you. Because now you'll be living proof. I watched Keanu close his eyes and take a deep breath. Then he walked over to Jason, knelt down, and said, "Hey, buddy, want to come home with me?" Jason smiled wide. "Really?" Keanu nodded, voice cracking. "Really?" That night, Keanu signed the papers, gave the vial to the doctors, and swore to protect Jason with everything he had. Cameras surrounded the hospital the next morning, but Keanu never spoke a word. He left quietly, holding Jason's hand, disappearing into a world that would never forget what he did. And when people asked later what Jason meant to him, Keanu just said, "He's not my clone, he's my son." Please subscribe channel for Keanu Reeves respect. Thanks.